Once untied, Dr. Matthews began flipping through his notes as if to stall. I drew my gun once more, its weight in my hand a reminder of the power I now possessed. "Work," I ordered, my voice unwavering as I kept the scientist at gunpoint. "You will create an antidote for the virus, or I swear I'll end you right here." Dr. Matthews nodded, his expression a mixture of fear and determination. He knew that his survival, and perhaps his redemption, now depended on his ability to find a solution. He worked tirelessly, the makeshift lab a battleground for his own survival as he worked fervently to reverse the effects of his creation. Hours stretched into days as he analyzed data, conducted experiments on himself, and searched for a way to neutralize the virus. As the days passed, the weight of our mission bore down on both of us. The hope that a cure could be found was countered by the harsh reality of the world outside, where violence and destruction reigned. Many times I had to ward off intruders, saving Dr. Matthews on several occasions. I could tell he was now haunted by the consequences of his actions. The process was grueling, and the atmosphere in the lab was fraught with tension. As the scientist approached a potential breakthrough, his excitement was palpable. His quest for redemption perhaps now a possibility. But I still couldn't fully trust his motives. Days later, just after he finally declared his success, a chilling transformation overtook Dr. Matthews. His body convulsed, and his eyes took on a wild, unfocused glare. The virus he had created had finally come full circle, infecting its creator. Merely hours after that, the scientist's movements grew increasingly erratic, and he lunged toward me with a violent desperation. I had no choice but to defend myself. With a heavy heart, I pulled the trigger, ending the life of the man who had brought the world to the brink of destruction. The lab fell into an eerie silence, a stark contrast to the chaos that had played out within its walls. I was alone once more, left with the overwhelming knowledge that the possible antidote to violent meningitis was in my possession, and my possession alone. Determined not to give up, I gathered the doctor's vials and the notes containing his research and packed them in my go-bag. The hope of salvation was now mine to carry, a heavy burden that could make all the difference, if only I could get this information into the right hands. Leaving the makeshift lab behind, I embarked on my new quest. As I walked through the forest, a sense of isolation closed in around me. The virus, the violent meningitis, had ravaged the world, and I had seen the extent of its destruction. Left alone in my thoughts, the anger and frustration that had boiled within me since the world had fallen into chaos now began to rise to the surface. I felt it in every step, in the gnawing resentment and uncontrollable anger that threatened to consume me. I knew I wasn't far from town, but my mind kept wandering. I was losing focus on my goal. With a sickening drop in my stomach, I realized the virus had finally found its way into my being, an infection that mirrored the violence and aggression it had unleashed upon the world. I knew that my time was limited, that the virus would eventually take hold, but I couldn't allow it to happen, not yet. I needed to ensure that the potential antidote, the remnants of Dr. Matthews' redemption, reached the right hands. I stopped and searched the bag until I found one of the most recently dated vials and hastily injected half of it into my arm. I hoped Dr. Matthews, in his last days, had truly wanted to help, and this latest serum wasn't another trick. Hours later, as I staggered onto the road, my strength waning, I spotted a car and climbed in. The keys were still in the ignition, but all I wanted to do was to fall asleep. Once again, the harsh reality of my situation entered my cloudy mind. I didn't dare allow myself to close my eyes. I raced the car into the next town, barely avoiding infected people, and more abandoned cars until by some miracle I saw it. A hospital waiting in the distance. It was a rare beacon of hope. With the last of my energy, I pushed forward. As I reached the hospital, clumsily parking the car and falling out of it, I was met by a small group of doctors and nurses who were still trying to provide care in a world that had lost all sense of order. With the bag full of vials and research papers clutched tightly in my hand, I managed to utter a few words, my voice weak but determined. "The cure," I whispered as I handed over the bag. They looked at me with a mix of confusion and urgency but took the vials. And then, as my strength finally gave way, I collapsed. Days later, I regained consciousness in the hospital with an IV drip in my arm. My mind clear, and I felt 100 times better than I had upon my arrival. Apparently, Dr. Matthews had made good on his promise.